Commissioner Lewis, we're ready when you are.
All right. All right. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, I hope everybody's solved their problems out there. Is there anyone else who wishes, I'll call one last time, to speak in favor of the petition who has not spoken already? Okay. Alrighty. We will now hear from those opposed to the project. Yes, ma'am. Now, when I've sworn someone in once, they're good. You're good.
Wonderful. That's
Yes.
great to hear.
Yes.
You might have them restate their.
Yes, if you would
Oh, yes.
restate your names and lot number again.
Okay. Can he be up here with me, my husband, or would you prefer we speak one at a time?
Could you,
I'm
yes.
sorry. Can he be up here with me, or would you prefer we speak one at a time?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you. I'm Lori Curtis, and I am at 6302 Spring Run Drive, Lot 152. So on the Harvest Wind side of things. I live downstream of Lanetta Lane, and I empathize with the drainage issues of our 19 neighbors on Lanetta Lane. I have no objection to phases 2 or 3. I do, however, have objections to phase 1. I imagine the residents of Lanetta Lane never intended that their request would result in sticking 133 of their downstream neighbors with the bill and degrading the landscape. Although this project has apparently been known to the township and the county for years, it was not made public for the broader public knowledge until about 3 weeks ago. And, I know you did touch base about that, but I don't know how we would have found that information on since we weren't added until later. Therefore, the opinions of the property owners who share the watershed are not represented in this plan before you. Now, I am not a hydrologist, but my neighbors and I observe the flow of the water day in and day out. We can add value to the planning process, providing insights that the Soil and Water Conservation District could not have known from aerial photos, maps, and brief site visits. So, my first request is that we be given a genuine opportunity to provide input. Therefore, I ask that the commissioners deny the Lanetta Lane ditch petition today or issue a continuance to today's hearing. Doing so will provide reassurance that this project truly benefits the entire community. 3 weeks between receiving notice of the project and a final hearing is simply just not enough time to understand the plan's intricacies and suggest amendments. The process was not designed to respect constituents of the watershed or the public input process. I understand that this is a timeline set forth in the Ohio Revised Code, not a timeline established by the commissioners. Just a minute. I truly believe there is a solution that can remedy the problems on Lanetta Lane without adversely impacting neighbors downstream. I would welcome the opportunity to work towards that goal in collaboration with Soil and Water and my fellow watershed neighbors. I made it a priority to do extensive research in this project. I have studied aerial photographs dating back to the 1960s, topographic maps. I've consulted a hydrologist, Friends of the Alum Creek and tributaries, and Delaware Soil and Water Conservation District. I've watched our local trustee meetings and walked the entire project area during dry and wet conditions. I have also reviewed all project documents that are publicly available. After all that work, I have arrived at the following list of concerns that I've organized into 4 categories: environmental, procedural, financial, and drainage. And I can provide you guys with a copy of what I'm saying today, too. So, beginning with the environmental. The plan does not specify the extent of vegetation to be cleared. The project area is not your traditional mowed grass ditch. It's classified as an intermittent stream on the auditor's website, and it is forested. Without tree preservation specifications written into the plan, the hired contractor would be within their rights to cut down all the trees if it did suit them. Without trees to shade the stream's eastern side, that's the side that we are on, the sun will bake the east bank all day, increasing water temperature. These warm, sunny conditions are the recipe for algae blooms like those already occurring downstream in the maintained waterway which runs through Center Green Park. So let me bring up some images here.
You see those?
Can you see these? Are they
Oh,
coming up?
I need to put the camera
Okay,
on.
thank you.
Have it.
So bottom left, the left picture, the bottom left there is Center Green Park. And this is the petitioned ditch for Center Green Park and what is happening to it, essentially. So you are seeing lots of algae blooms there. There's no trees to shade that. The runoff is going into there. So that is what is happening to that one. The next image, this is the water, the clean water that you can see currently in our creek. So you can see clean water, you can see all of the animal footprints there. You can see some of the big trees that are right along the bank there, you know, where the work would be taking place. So what I can say is that algae blooms, they negatively impact aquatic habitat for fish, insects, and amphibians. Toxic algae can poison family pets and cause further issues to our downstream neighbors in Westerville and Columbus who receive our waters. Not only does that vegetative buffer of trees cool the stream's water, but it also filters nitrates from the stormwater before it reaches the stream, providing a water quality benefit. Without the tree's roots, we will see increased stream bank erosion. So here, next slide. So this is our forest. So you're seeing on the left-hand side there, the big, beautiful trees that we've been able to enjoy. We have plenty of heron, different creatures there. So the vegetative buffer serves as an animal habitat. The forest's linear shape makes it a highway for animals to travel throughout an otherwise developed area. My children document their animal sightings, which have included fox, heron, endangered bats, and eagles. A loss of bat habitat will mean an increase in mosquitoes. Mosquito-borne illnesses such as Eastern equine encephalitis, St. Louis encephalitis, and West Nile virus are a real threat, and COVID has taught us to take all public health threats seriously. Go next slide real quick. So this is my daughter here with her friends at the Columbus Zoo, and you'll notice that the tree on the right says this tree is rich with potential wonder. So, a point of pride for Delaware County is the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. Our children absolutely love the zoo. They have learned the importance of habitat preservation and conservation. Our children have absorbed the messages and taken it to heart. They would be confused and devastated to witness their community leaders approve a project that so clearly violates the environment. So the next topic that I would like to speak on is procedural. Next. When reviewing the information meeting presentation on March 2nd, 2019, on slide 5 here, there is an emphasis that landowners work together on a cooperative basis to enact a solution. Phase 1 was added to the project very late, and residents of Harvest Wind were not notified until approximately 3 weeks before today's final hearing. This has not allowed adequate time for impacted residents who will be sharing the cost of the project to fully assess the scope or consider alternative options. The residents of the village of Harvest Wind were not notified at all, even though the proposal would necessitate the use of heavy machinery along their property line. The ORC procedure has not been adequate in honoring the spirit of landowners working together on a cooperative basis to enact a solution. It is not clear that jurisdictional confirmations were ever obtained. The U.S. Geological Survey map shows this in an intermittent channel from 1964 to 2016, so a stream. Delaware County surveys, 1969 to 2006, showed this as an intermittent stream, not a ditch. Many bodies of water are augmented by humans, but they are not considered ditches. Streams are treated with more care than ditches. The terminology matters significantly here. If this project is truly in the best interest of all involved and communicated clearly, this would have been a nearly empty room today. Instead, you can see the number of community members who have rearranged their schedules on a Monday morning to fill this room feeling panicked, rushed, and confused. Real estate estimates indicate that properties bordering the wooded area to the south could lose as much as 20%, as you've heard earlier, due to the impact of sightlines, loss of property, and water accumulation. The privacy for these homes are a big part of their appeals to buyers. Even without the claims damages, we still suffer financial consequences. The next point is downstream drainage. The harvest wind retention ponds are at capacity now without the added water from Lanetta Lane. It is unclear if stormwater calculations and modeling, which would be required for similar private development projects, would have been conducted to verify downstream capacity is adequate. Citizens of the village of Harvest Wind have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to ensure their drainage is functioning well. They should not have to worry that their investment will be destroyed as a result of this project. As you have heard, there are many reasons to vote down the Lanetta Lane Ditch project as proposed today. Once again, I ask the commissioners to deny the Lanetta Lane Ditch petition today and issue a continuance to allow more time for discussion and plan revision to suit all affected parties. Per Ohio Revised Code 6131, to justify this decision, I believe Phase 1 of the project is not necessary as it is written. Phase 1 snagging and clearing of 1,200 feet of intermittent stream is excessive and destructive. Phase 1 of this project is not conducive to the public welfare of Harvest Wind residents, nor is Phase 1 conducive to the welfare of the environment, which is intertwined within our own. The benefit to the majority of property owners in this project area is minimal at best and does not outweigh the multifaceted cost. If continued, I would like to explore the following plan amendments for Phase 1. Flagging the trees that are 3 caliper or larger for preservation. Hand removal of log jams to minimize degradation of the vegetative buffer with heavy equipment. Only remove sediment in the ends and outlets and near those pond drains that you saw sunken down. You could hydroblast maybe where the clogs are instead of snagging and clearing the entire 1,200 square feet or entire 1,200 feet of stream. This meeting today is one of many items on your very busy schedules. However, your vote is a pivotal moment for your constituents in Genoa Township. For many of us, this is our first time finding cause to stand up in a public meeting to advocate for ourselves. I hope your decision today will be remembered as one of collaboration and problem solving for the common good. Many here today live in the village at Harvest Wind and are not legally allowed to speak, but have attended in solidarity, as you had seen earlier. They have emailed you their opposition to rushing into a decision that will have long-term consequences to our environment and our faith in the public process. Thank you. And this is, our daughter did a conservation project last year for Franklin Soil and Water, and so she placed second place here. So you see her message, healthy forests, healthy communities. So I just wanted to show you that. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one question for you.
Oh, yes, of course.
You mentioned only remove the sediment or the obstructions at
And
the
the
beginning
inlets,
or the end.
Yeah, so the beginning and the end, and also near those ponds where they're showing it sunk in there. You could, what was that? Oh, and he's got a presentation on that. But yes, we were talking about hand digging that sediment there or removing it in some way near the inlets, the outlets, and near the retention ponds there. Removing the log jams by hand. Just some alternative options to dredging, this creek and potentially knocking over these trees. We just want some provisions in place, some sort of provisions in place to guarantee that these trees aren't going to be knocked over. And the way it's written, it's not there.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you very much.
Your presentation, if you make that available to the clerk?
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to the petition?
I'll go ahead and speak if that's all right. I'm already here. Again, my name's Casey Curtis. I live at 6302 Spring Run Drive in lot 152. Pull up my slides here if I could. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. When a project of this magnitude stands to have such a significant impact ecologically, logistically, and financially on so many neighbors for decades to come, all of the affected parties deserve to be heard. We all empathize with the drainage issues of our neighbors on Lanetta Lane. However, with regards to the drainage improvement project, we do not feel that our needs as a community have been adequately represented in the plan as it stands. I have no issues with phases 2 or 3 of the project. However, phase 1 was added 3 months before the final hearing of a 3-year proposal. Citizens of Harvest Wind, who are expected to help finance the project while simultaneously bearing the risk of the most substantial negative effects, were not notified until mere weeks before the final hearing. Residents of the villages of Harvest Wind, who could have heavy machinery operating a stone's throw from their property lines, were not notified at all. There was this publication discussed earlier, but this did not seem to adequately raise awareness, even if meeting legal muster. These are engaged citizens, our neighbors, and they're here, even if not allowed to speak in solidarity. They're hearing about this project for the first time in many cases, despite the previous publication. The rapid nature of these changes, combined with the lack of messaging around the project, have raised many doubts and concerns about the project overall. There must be a solution that remedies the drainage problems on Lanetta Lane while avoiding detrimental effects on the downstream majority of homeowners. I call upon the commissioners to decline the plan in its current state and at a minimum issue a continuance to allow adequate time to work with impacted constituents to optimize problematic aspects of this project. This will build confidence that the project truly benefits the entire community and is not simply solving a problem in one area while creating new problems in another. The project decision, as alluded to previously today, is based upon 3 factors as specified in ORC 6131. 1, is the project necessary? 2, is the project conducive to the public welfare? And 3, do the benefits of the project outweigh the costs? Is it necessary? I believe that the project as written is not necessary. The invasive nature of the plan as written, with the potential for widespread snagging and clearing, stands to cause excessive damage and local disturbance. We must be able to find alternative options if given more time. Is it conducive to public welfare? The project as written is not conducive to the public welfare for the majority of citizens involved. We were not aware of any stormwater calculations or modeling which would be required for similar projects in other contexts. Ability for downstream symptoms to manage the increased drainage are not entirely clear at this time. I'm going to pull up a slide here. On the left, you can see the project proposal with the purple hash line there being the creek in question and the drainage pathway. Here's our retention pond. As we alluded to earlier, you can see issues with the drainage as they stand in terms of log jams. Here is the retention pond creek drain without water saturation, or it's a bit high, but during a storm here, we took this week, you can see it's overflowing, overwhelmed. There are fixes in terms of eliminations here, removal of the log jams that would not be as invasive or require such aggressive means that could stand to level our entire forest. And digging it out, could we eliminate the sediment at the inlets, the outlets, the pond drains? There's also an area of narrowed water flow with downstream log jams that is not included in the drainage improvement project, but certainly stands to affect it. You can see my pointer. It's down in this area around Autumn Lake Drive. Can you see it? There. Block drainage here could lead to buildup in water for Harvest Wind and the villages of Harvest Wind. It is unclear to me if any formal assessment has been done to determine if this downstream area could support increased drainage. Here are photos of that area. You can see the drain on the upper left there during some storms this week. You can see the high levels of water. The middle picture is from above looking south below the drainage pipe, and you can see, I'm sorry, that's the furthest right, is looking down from the south area with the foliage kind of overwhelmed by water. There are log jams and obstructions here. So it seems to me that we've taken a situation in which we had to add phase 1 to accommodate for the drainage that was inadequate from phases 2 and 3. And now we have this obstruction at the southernmost point, which stands to obstruct water there. So are we just moving one problem further south, where there's obstructed drainage there that's going to accumulate water, and we'll be back here in 5 years talking about issues in Harvest Wind and the villages at Harvest Wind due to, lack of consideration of adequate drainage downstream from the current project. Brett mentioned earlier this 30,000-foot view. I think in terms of approaching the watershed, that's a very wise assessment. We need to take the watershed as a whole into consideration. We don't need to move one problem further downstream and then cause problems for our neighbors there. We need to address it as a whole and assess what capacity there is there for that drainage to allow it to flow and improve the watershed and all the drainage issues that have been addressed today. In terms of the benefits versus costs, we think that the cost of this project will outweigh the benefits. We've talked about the financial impact even without the claims of damages. The ecological costs that are much more difficult to quantify will include, as we've alluded to, increased erosion due to loss of deep root systems, loss of animal habitats, creation of toxic algae blooms, and increased burden of mosquitoes and associated diseases. I again ask that the commissioners vote this project down as it is currently written. It fails in all 3 decision-making criteria, that is, in that it is not necessary as written, it is not conducive to the greater public welfare as written, and the costs outweigh the potential benefits. We feel there must be other options. At a minimum, a continuance should be granted to allow more time to address problems with the plan. This could allow for more time for discussion, particularly of phase 1, which stands to have a negative impact on the highest number of downstream homeowners and constituents. I thank you very much for your time and consideration today.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against the project?
Once again, my name is Kevin Sanislow. I'm at parcel number 116 at 6224 Spring Run Drive in the Harvest Wind subdivision. I appreciate everything that my neighbors have said so far. I think they've raised really good points. I think that one of the problems, though, is that you all, as the commissioners, are confined to what the revised code actually says and what you can and cannot do here today. And under 613121, you have to make a decision today. And that decision has to be either for or against the project. And it's my goal here today to present an argument as to why this project, as it's currently constituted, should be dismissed. For the people who live downstream, it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. And the reason is because 3 weeks ago, we were brought into this mix. We've had no input on this at all. I sympathize for those folks on Lanetta Lane. They've had problems for years. Years versus weeks. That's the problem that I have with the project as it's currently constituted. We've had no say in this whatsoever. I've lived on Spring Run Drive for 15 years. I used to live up higher in the area. I lived on Barrington Estates, or in Barrington Estates, and my family and I moved down to where we live on 6224 4.5 years ago. And we lived on the same side of the street, so it was on the west side of Spring Run Drive. We also had the barrier to the back, which is also part of the same watershed. Where we used to live on Spring Run in Barrington, they actually have a large catch basin that Barrington Estates installed when they built that development back in 1998. It is a dry piece of land. When there's a lot of rainfall, it fills up and allows the water to get into the ditch, which is further downstream. I haven't seen any proposals to even do anything of that sort here. There are other alternatives here that have not been pursued. Again, we in Harvest Wind have not been consulted about this. The reason that my family and I moved up the street was because we had two things. We had a tree-lined back, the woods in the back there, and we also had this retention pond. I have 2 children. That is what I wanted. I wanted tranquility. I wanted peace of mind. When I work 80 hours a week, what do I want to do when I come home? I want to hang out with my family, and I want to sit on my back porch and do nothing and have complete peace and quiet. With all due respect to my neighbors across the woods, I don't want to see them. That's what I paid for. That's what I pay a premium for. And I know Mr. Curran moved in 1 year ago, and he paid a premium for that house. He had to outbid 4 other people to get that home. We have been given no opportunity to talk to Mr. Bacon or any of his people. That's where I have a problem with this proposal as it currently sits. Under the revised code, 6131.21, there are 8 factors that you all can look at in terms of whether this project should or should not be approved. I've highlighted 5 here today that I'm going to address very briefly. The cost and location of construction, the compensation for land to be taken, the effect on the land along or in the vicinity to the area in question, i.e. the ditch or the stream, the benefits to the public welfare, and any other matters against improvement. You all can weigh all of those when it comes to your ultimate conclusion here today. Cost and location. Section 1 of the project runs from the north to the south along the Harvest Wind properties situated on Spring Run Drive. The entire portion of section number 1 is a stretch of woods that provide a natural barrier between the residents on my side of the street and the people on Langton Circle. And as it's been noted consistently here today, those folks were never put on the petition. They have no voice here today. And when you are one of those 8 homes on Langton Circle whose backyard is between myself and those windows, and you have no voice, I have a problem with that. And I have a problem with it because there's going to be machinery in their woods. This is a picture that I took last week. This is from my backyard. This is the retention pond, and those are the woods. There are a family of deer that live in there. There are red-tailed fox. You can see bald eagles up in those trees. They will come down and they will snatch fish out of that pond. There are heron. There are white heron, which are very endangered species. There are multiple different types of ducks, not geese, ducks. There are a family of buzzards that live in that forest. And there are many other creatures that I don't even know about that live in those woods. But we've seen no study by the engineering department about what the impact is going to be on the wildlife in these woods. Not only on my peace of mind, but the other creatures that live in there that call that place home. And as we all know, as Delaware County gets developed more and more each day, these animals are forced to very small areas. These animals have been able to adapt, and they live there. I've paid a premium in my house to have this in my backyard. And this is going to be taken away from me. And I've had no say in it. None. No input about what would be better in section 1 or not. And unfortunately, the way the revised code is written is that you all have to make a decision based on what's been presented today. And so I'm asking that when we go through all the factors, that the application as it currently stands, the petition, that it be denied. Compensation. We've already gone over this in terms of the damages. I would disagree with your attorney's assessment that I believe that as a member of the Homeowners Association at Harvest Wind, I have a right to the damages of that property because it is owned in part by the homeowners association, to which I have a deeded requirement to pay into that fund. Again, damage is continued. I would also disagree with the engineer's assessment about the retention pond levels being higher than they've ever been. If you look at the retention pond where I live, those water levels are the same that they've always been in a stable state. Obviously, when it rains, a retention pond swells up with water to accommodate it, and then it flows down. My problem is that there's never been an assessment done or any study that's going to say, what happens to that retention pond in my backyard if we let more water go out of it? There are tons of fish and other types of wildlife. There are beavers that live in there. There's muskrat. There are many different types of fish. There are 4 and 5 pound bass that live in there. Bluegill, catfish, carp. There are snapping turtles that will traverse from the pond on the west side of the bank over to my pond. Those snapping turtles, and honest to God, they are as big as 2 or 3 basketballs. And yet we want to bring machinery in there. But there's never been a study done about what the impact's going to be as well, about water levels being lowered forever in those retention ponds. And I've seen it when it happens, when fish and stuff die off in these areas. It is not nice, it is not pretty, it is disgusting. So who's going to come clean up all that dead fish, all that stuff, if it dies off because the water level has been lowered? I've never seen anything on that. The effect on the land in the vicinity. This is in the original report from the meeting 3 years ago. This is from Mr. Bacon's report, number 3, which I think is interesting that he put it as the third factor, which was removal of existing trees and brush in the improvement area. That was the third thing on his list in terms of factors unfavorable. What we have not seen to date is what is and is not going to be removed from this area. And that's because we, as the people in Harvest Wind, were never given an opportunity to input in this project at all. We could have done a walkthrough. We have a homeowners association. We could have been put on notice. We could have done a walkthrough and said, yes, it's okay if you do that, or not okay you do that. But unfortunately, we haven't been given that opportunity. And unfortunately for the 3 of you, you have to vote on the project as it currently stands today. And we have not been given input there. And again, this is a picture taken from last week, quoting Mr. Bacon's report. And this is, again, a picture of one of those deer. And this is actually not even my son. This is just one of the neighbor kids who happen to be out there fishing. This is what you get from our property. You have people harmony, and we want to destroy that. The benefits, or the lack thereof, I would say, with respect to the project, another criteria, the home values. The homes on Spring Run Drive are more desirable based on the seclusion of these woods. Nature, there are many species of animals that will be adversely impacted. Ditch usage. Bringing the east side of Harvest Wind into the cost makes no logical sense. And I say that for this statement. From where Medallion is on the north side, and you run all the way down to Maxtown Road, every single one of those homes in all of those developments, they eventually drain into the same stream. Whether it's Eagle Chase, whether it's the other parts of Harvest Wind, whether it's Park Bend Drive, whether it is the condominiums on the west side of Spring Run Drive further down, or it is Barrington Estates, and then all the way down into Westerville. They all drain into the same ditch. But somehow, it is just us on that one corner of Harvest Wind that are being asked to pay into the cost of this assessment without actually looking at it from a global perspective. It makes no sense. And furthermore, the 114 homes that were brought in, we've had 3 weeks to look at this. All others, as I just said, there are many other homes that use the same ditch and stream that are not being represented here today. Again, people from the village of Harvest Wind. Other factors against the petition. So where I reside at parcel number 116, that home was built in the year 2000. Lanetta Lane parcels. So knowing that Lanetta Lane has a drainage problem, knowing when these people build their homes and they go in there or they resell them, they continue to compound the problem. 37% of the homes on that stretch of Lanetta Lane, 37% of the people, their homes were either built on the same year or after the homes on Spring Run Drive were built. We were there first. They're adding to the problem. And so here are all the homeowners that have built their land and their property after us on Spring Run Drive. Last one. They are currently building another home there. It is currently under construction. So they won't stop. The people on Lanetta Lane won't stop. And yet they want us on Spring Run Drive to bear these costs, whether it's from a financial standpoint or from impeding upon our tranquility. The lead petitioners, and I point this out for other factors weighing against the petition here today, which is the final factor. The lead petitioners in this case, who are Ms. Klucherowski and Ms. Rohrkemper, on November the 22nd of 2021, so this was 9 months ago, they are parcel, I think, 36, I'm sorry. They filed a variance with the Genoa Township Zoning Commission. They filed a variance to separate and divide their land. In the variance, which is up here, it reads, quote, "Without a variance, there is no use for the property outside of it being part of a very large front yard that requires us to mow regularly. With an approved variance, a new home built on this property to the character of other homes on Lanetta Lane would enhance and add value to the neighborhood." So the lead petitioners, 9 months ago, wanted to subdivide their piece of property. They continue to put homes on Lanetta Lane, even though they are saying that they have water problems. And now they want to make it my problem and take away from what I paid a premium for on Section 1. There was a township hearing on December the 14th of 2021. These are public records. The first item up for discussion that day was the area variance by Ms. Klucherowski and Ms. Mary Kay Rohrkemper. That variance was granted. Their property conveyed on June 6th of 2022, so 2.5 months ago. And there is the copy from the auditor's website that their property, so they subdivided number 36. It is now a separate piece of property, so they can put another home on it. So I have issue with people coming up here and talking about their plight and their problems when they continue to add to the problem, and now they want to put more property up there. And now they want me and my neighbors to bear the cost from a financial standpoint and also from loss of tranquility. It's a bad idea. This is an overhead view of where my home is. I'm on 6224 Spring Run Drive right here. As you can see, here's the natural barrier provided by these woods, and you can see how close these folks are on the opposite side in the villages. The irreversible negative impact of Section 1 greatly outweighs any benefit to the entire project. I cannot stress that enough, because we do not know what the engineers are going to do. Mr. Bacon, earlier today, said, he came up here and he said, and I quoted him, he's going to save as many trees as possible. That was his operative word, as possible. Mr. Bacon also said, quote, "There are very similar projects in the past." Well, if there have been similar projects in the past, and this issue is so significant, then why do we not have representative pictures of what it looks like before and after? That could have easily been presented, and it wasn't. And again, the damages, the property values along the woods are far exceed any construction costs of the project. These people, as I mentioned before, on Spring Run have been here long before Lanetta Lane. And this entire project is not conducive to the public welfare of the people in Harvest Wind. I would ask you to deny the petition. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against the project? And I've sworn you in.
Yes,
So just restate your name, please, and parcel.
Yes, I will. My name is Jahan Thomas, parcel 151. I've lived at 6286 Spring Run Drive for the last 11 years. I am also a resident of Westerville, and born and raised. I do care about what's going on with the homes on Lanetta Lane. I would not want to have flooding issues in my home because of the land, original construction, or lack of maintenance performed by the HOAs or the township. I also care about our neighbors further south of us. Flooding coming their way, pollution and silt, and a deteriorating park which already suffers from flooding and algae blooms, especially along the cement troughs that you saw pictures of before. Lastly, I care about the wildlife that resides in this area. Many endangered species call this area home, including the Indiana bat, the northern long-eared bat, eagles, and the monarch butterfly, along with birds, aquatic life, fish, and snakes. The project looks to be a great thing for the drainage issues that are affecting the residents of Lanetta Lane. A cheap fix, however, is not always the best one. For the greater good, the communities further south, Center Green Park, water quality and local ecology, the negative impact far outweighs the benefits of a few. We, as your constituents, are asking you to delay this project so the county can look at alternative ways to improve drainage and pinch points along the entire watershed, not only at the sites within the project, further south, closer to Center Green, to fully evaluate costs. We mostly hope that the technique of open channel restoration to be reconsidered and more log jam removal by hand to preserve wildlife and tree root systems that help control the drainage. Drainage pipes south of Phase 1, close to Center Green Drive, to be included also in the improvement. And lastly, the guarantee that 15 feet or higher trees are left untouched, and that if they have to be felled, replace them with a similar caliber of tree. Thank you very much for your time and everyone else's efforts here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against the petition?
Me again.
Hello.
Promise to be briefer this time. Again, Sean Curran, I'm at 6244 Spring Run Drive. I want to just touch on something I heard, and I want to just clarify it so that everybody knows. In the first report, it was stated that there was nothing for stormwater either planned or implemented for Lanetta Lane. Now, is that true?
Brett?
Yes, the Lanetta Lane subdivision, unlike the Harvest Wind subdivision, Medallion Eagle Trace, some of the other ones that we have heard thrown out, was not planned with any stormwater infrastructure installed as part of the subdivision build-out. Just was of an era that when it began, and Chris, jump in if I'm missing something here, the development started at a time when county standards were not what they are today, not what they were when Harvest Wind and those other sections were built or being planned, more to the point. And so even though some of the houses were constructed later on, the platting and subdivision, I'll say subdividing, had already been done, and no storm infrastructure was installed as part of the development.
Okay, thank you.
Now, not meant as a gotcha, but I also heard testimony that everything was fine until it started plugging up downstream. Now, that would imply that somehow there was a drainage infrastructure in place that was working well until we came up with some debris or other clogging of the downstream channel. Now, I don't think it can be both, so that's where my confusion lies on the situation in the drainage. Like either was planned and it drained that way, or it was not, and maybe just by happenstance it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be glad to address that if you
Oh,
would
sure.
like for me to.
Engineer
So-
Bauserman.
Brett's statement was regarding what improvements were made within the limits of Lanetta Lane plat when it was built. And he's correct that that happened in an era before we saw widespread development in the county when Lanetta Lane was first created. And so those standards weren't in place. I don't know what the standards were at that time, but they weren't built like many of the older roads and developments in the county. To your question of implying that there were improvements in place, the channel that we're talking about, the ditch that we're talking about today, was originally constructed as a county petition project in, is it 1808, Brad? Is that
1869.
1869, okay. So it's been there a long time, and there have been several petitions over time on that. But that ditch, we call it a ditch because it's done under the county ditch laws, is how it was created. That was built and served the surrounding land uses, and it has served as the outlet for all the different developments that have been created in that area. And so that infrastructure that you're asking about has been in place longer than any of the developments have been there. When the Harvest Wind development was built, the area we're talking about in Section 1 didn't look like it did today in terms of vegetation and a tree-lined corridor. It was cleaned out to the level that it was established in that 1800 petition. And so what's happened there in terms of the vegetation has grown over time because it hasn't been maintained. Now there are certainly some trees in there that are older than that, but most of the growth and vegetation has occurred from the time the Harvest Wind development and others have been built.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely not. You could disagree with that. I was actually on site when Harvest Wind was built as part of the construction of that, and there was definitely work done on Harvest Wind to that ditch to provide an adequate outlet for those developments. So it did not look like it does today.
Brett.
I'll also pony on to what Chris has stated. With regards to the distinction between a planned comprehensive stormwater system and what I'll call prevailing grade and remnant farm drainage, certainly there was drainage from the standpoint of water flows from point A to point B, and old farm tile that existed when the Lanetta Lane, and frankly, most of Genoa Township was in agricultural production. There would have been subsurface drain tile that was installed in the area, not just in Lanetta Lane, but all over the place. And certainly, yes, that drainage continued to exist. To what level of functionality? Obviously, to the, I'll say what I've heard from the folks on Lanetta Lane, an ever increasingly less functionality, but that remnant drainage and that prevailing surface grade still existed. But there was no indeed planned comprehensive stormwater system. And when I say planned stormwater system, I mean, storm tile that begins at 12 inches and goes up from there, catch basins, curb inlets, things like that you see in those other subdivisions that we've heard mentioned today, that did not exist in Lanetta Lane and does not exist there today.
Okay, thank you.
Well, where I'm going with that is whether or not it was intentional or it served as a de facto drainage outlet in its current existence, we can at least determine that when we can pinpoint when it was last working effectively, what year was that? And is there any evidence that the extra water coming from Lanetta Lane caused any issues downstream? So that could provide some comfort to the residents downstream that perhaps it's not as large a issue as we might fear. But without that, we're rolling the dice, and with our plans for our attempt at compensation for that rolling of the dice now dismissed, the odds or the risks for us have gone through the roof. So what I'm saying is, if we're trying this as something new to try to relieve the problem, we don't know if that'll work. So all the risk is borne on us because we're downstream. And we don't know how many trees will be taken out. We can't know how many trees will be taken out. We don't know how many trees might become diseased or anything else bad happened because humans are in there messing around. What we do know, and in cases of ambiguity, grab for any fact you can find, is we can be guaranteed no impact if there are not humans in there cutting up the woods. And that's what we're grasping at. And that's the only thing we can grasp at this point. Now, if we're trying to solve a problem with hoping and guessing that that will solve it, then it presents a real problem for us. And that's why I'm trying to determine, is there or was there any drainage whatsoever that was in place in Lanetta? Because, you know, it seems like it was working at some point, and if it wasn't the Spring Run Creek, what was it? And is there any other solution we could put in place that doesn't create the same risks that we have? Now, they've already touched on the downstream, which I think will absolutely have to be addressed, because if truly is the log jam and silt in the woods behind my house, that exact situation is in place at the southern point where this work is supposed to stop. So it stands to reason that you clear that and you immediately have a backup that is just now moved a little downstream. So I think we have to address that. And I know that's a big issue with the village at Harvest Wind. They've got a retention pond that runs along that stream as well. They've voiced concern that they're worried about some runoff into there that could potentially flood their properties. So I think the scope of this actually, if we are to do this, we'll have to expand to truly get a proper solution. So that's all I wanted to say. And thank you very much for all your listening, and appreciate it.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak in opposition to the petition?
Actually, I had a couple questions for Brett, if you could.
Sure.
The topic of the downstream outlet at the southern end, talk about that. I mean, how has that been factored in?
So the work proposed is what is necessary to create the good and sufficient outlet for the Lanetta Lane petition request. It's our opinion that this project is neither going to benefit nor exacerbate those downstream areas. That channel, as it exists, has the capacity to handle the flows that are coming down it now. It will continue to have that capacity. There may be issues in the downstream channel that are affecting the basin outlets for the village at Harvest Wind. There may be issues that are affecting other sections of Harvest Wind. I know there's another Harvest Wind retention basin that's a little bit further to the south of there. There may be issues further down, you know, I believe Center Green Park's been brought up. I've personally, you know, I've seen the channel there, and there may be issues further south. In order for the board to consider a project that would expand, I'll say I don't want to say expand the scope of this project, but expand the scope of work of a petition project, we would have to have a new petition request specifically to address those areas. We've not been asked to look at those areas. The project, as we've proposed it addresses the scope that we've been asked to look at, and in order to do something more, that requires a new request.
Yes, I'm glad you clarified that, because you're bound by what is contained within the petition.
Right, right. I have a phrase that I
And
like to use
addressing
often, that I didn't write the law, I don't have the power to change the law, and I cannot ignore the law. And we're bound to follow the Ohio Revised Code. The Ohio Revised Code spells out several different options, or I'll say doesn't spell out several different options. I'll go back to one of the, and I'm going to apologize, I don't remember which person it was, but brought up the slide that we used for our informational meeting that talked about landowners working together on a cooperative basis. That is an option for landowners to address a drainage problem. They have that option of working together, of developing a project, paying for that project without involving the county. That's one option. The second option is they can file a civil lawsuit. The third option is they can use the petition process. And the petition process is, to the best of my knowledge, the only means by which the county is involved in that process.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Another question I had
I'm sorry. Could I
Yeah.
add on to
Before we
the
go on to
answer,
the next
an
topic,
answer
sure.
to his, add on to his answer about the drainage impacts downstream. Right now, the basin in Harvest Wind is, it is higher than the plan, the way it was planned and originally constructed. So it may not be higher in my observation in recent years, but the elevation of that basin sits at least a foot higher than it was planned to sit right now. The basin upstream from there, up by the golf course and behind Lanetta Lane, also, I think, 2 feet
2 feet.
higher.
2
2
feet.
feet higher than, than it was designed right now. And that's all those are because the outlet of the basins are restricted by the elevation in the ditch. So, by lowering the ditch bottom elevation, restoring it to its original grade, allows the height of the ponds to drop as well. And the reason that's important is that's what we call freeboard. Those ponds were designed so that in storm events, the outlet will not take as much flow as what the rainfall delivers to it, and so it builds up in those basins. Right now, there's no freeboard in those basins for water to build up, and so a drop of water into that basin finds its way to Spring Run and is on downstream. And so those property owners downstream aren't benefiting from the stormwater retention or detention that was originally designed into those projects. And so in that regard, the downstream properties actually will benefit from the stormwater management features functioning properly once the depth of the basin is restored. So I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you.
So, kind of a related question, certainly. Lanetta Lane was developed, when Lanetta Lane was developed, did that actually add any water to the downstream flow? The actual development of...
Did not change the watershed. So the amount of acres that drain to a given point, and for this purpose, I'll use the downstream terminus of this proposed project. The amount of acres that drain to that point now are the same as what drained to that point before any of this development started in Genoa Township. Certainly, without doing a detailed, before and after runoff calculation, which I don't have the ability to do now because Lanetta Lane is already built out, there is some, I'll say, increase, and Chris, please feel free to jump in here as you need. There would be some increase because of the impervious area that has been added to the watershed, but I don't think that level, typically you have to get to a certain threshold of impervious area in a watershed before you really see a change in the peak runoff amount. So I don't believe Lanetta Lane is dense enough a development to move us to that change in threshold. So, but the amount of area, the drainage area is unchanged.
So therefore, the amount of rainwater that comes isn't going to change?
Well, the rainwater is not the amount of runoff is purely dependent on the amount of rain we get and the time that we get it in. Obviously, I wish I could design you a project that controlled the weather, but I don't have that ability, unfortunately. One other point I'd like to address that I've heard brought up with regards to the wildlife, these projects are by law required to be reviewed by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, including the Division of Wildlife. They have reviewed that, approved the project, and we construct these projects within their guidelines.
Okay. Thank you, Brett.
I have a question, Brett.
Sure.
These are always emotional issues, and I understand, depending on where I live, how I would react to it. But I do think it's a legitimate question. First of all, if I bought one of those houses in the last 15 years, and I have that green space behind me, I know I have an expectation, maybe not legal, but I do have an expectation. I guess but we also have an obligation to the people upstream to address. and that's required, we're required to address that. But I do think the reassurance to those neighbors downstream that the change in the environment is going to be minimal rather than substantial. I think we all go into it expecting it's going to be cleared out. You're saying that's not going to happen, but there is a line in between there. It's still an issue.
I understand the
And
concerns.
I guess the question I'm asking, the reassurance that minimal, and I'm going to be sarcastic, take a chainsaw, go through there and just take all the dead wood out and minimize the damage and keep the backhoes out of there. That may not be practical, but there's got to be some reassurance we can give those neighbors that it's going to be minimal and down the road that it's not going to be as bad as they think it may be, just based on their own.
All I can point to, Commissioner Merrill, is our very successful track record of building these projects in Delaware County, with your board and past boards, with between our partnership, between ourselves and the county engineer, we just have a track record that's not how we don't do it that way. We don't go in and clear cut. We don't go in and
But-
we do need to dip.
But they haven't experienced that.
I understand that,
And that's the
absolutely.
reason I'm asking
Yeah.
you, as loudly and as clear as you can, reassure them that that's not going to happen.
I think I already have. I believe I have.
They're shaking.
I'm not sure that there's anything I'm going to say to the board, to the landowners that are not in favor of the petition that's going to change their minds or make them feel better at this point. All I can do is point to our past history, our past track record. And I can say exactly that, and I've had conversations with multiple landowners, many of these folks, and what I have told them is if a tree is within the channel, it's probably going to have to come out. It's an impediment to drainage. I think Engineer Bowserman would agree with me on that. That tree's probably going to have to come out. Obviously, the dead trees that are laying in the channel, those need to come out. They're an impediment to the drainage. A mature tree that's up on the bank, it's just simply a case of we don't want to take it out, and the contractor's not going to want to take it out. It's time and money for them to remove trees. We do not propose these projects or estimate these projects on a per tree removal basis. We don't pay them per tree. It's a lump sum bid. And so there is no incentive for them to want to take out a tree that they have to. And that's just our track record. That's 20 years of working on these projects, that history that I have to draw on. And I understand the landowners don't have that history. And certainly I've been in cases myself, but that's all I can say.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Brett. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against the petition? Well, who has not spoken yet? Did you? Yes. Go ahead.
Do I have to get sworn in? Or do
Yes, I better. Yeah. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. My name is Jeff Dennis. It's Donald Dennis on the property form. Parcel number is 5, address is 7811 Lanetta Lane. My only question kind of goes back to something earlier about prevailing wage. What would be the effect of not including the prevailing wage in the original cost estimate versus maybe having to go back and revise it based on the conversation that took place to include the prevailing wage dynamic in a future? How would that affect the assessments?
That's a good question. 'Cause I was gonna
Yeah,
ask.
I was going to ask that too.
Well, I think that this is Eric Hostetler. I did state earlier that you are restricted by law, that you cannot award a contract greater than the estimate that's approved at the final hearing. There's not a procedure for increasing that after the fact. So what I can't speak to is what the impact on bids might actually be if that estimate was calculated without prevailing wage and it is required to be bid, including prevailing wage requirements.
I'll speak to the estimate itself. Our estimate does contain contingency, and although I think we need some clarification on whether this project would be needed to be bid per the prevailing wage, I'm still confident in our estimate. That being said, this is a time period, a climate where we've seen significant increase in construction costs. And, I think on all of our projects right now, I'm happy when we get a successful bid, because you just don't know at this point. We don't know what construction costs are going to do. We don't know whether they're going to keep going up like they have been, whether they're going to go down. But I'll echo what Eric said, that should we find ourselves in a situation where we cannot get a successful bid for whatever reason, be it, prevailing wage costs, be it material cost increase, whatever, then we cannot accept that bid that's in excess. And I think, though we've never found ourselves in the position where that was the case, if we ever got in a position where we cannot get a successful bid, then we would have to reconvene this final hearing with a new estimate in place and obviously new
That's a
proposed
question.
assessments mailed
How far
out.
back, we don't start over, we just have to come back and redo the numbers? Is that what you're saying, or am I missing something?
This was an issue that I did not realize until the presentation, that prevailing wage was not included in the estimate. So I would have to look into that. I don't have an answer for you today. as to
Prevailing as a
whether-
result of Genoa being involved?
That's correct, and that would be limited to, if you did not proceed with sections 3, N and S, the percentage of the assessment would drop within the range where this would not be a prevailing wage project. So if we were just looking at sections 1 and 2, for example, it would meet the exemption for prevailing wage.
Yes. Oh, boy. Is there anyone here from the Homeowners Association on the board? Neither, I guess the only one would be Harvest Wind, and not the, Harvest Wind has a separate Homeowners Association?
That is correct.
Okay, anybody here from the board that,
No, I reached out to them. This is
thank you, yes, please come forward.
This is Mr. Sanislow. I reached out to the Homeowners Association. We don't have direct contact with them. It's through Century or someone like that. They contract out with somebody. And so I reached out to them a week and a half ago for an official position, and I did not
I
get
mean,
any.
I guess I'm wondering if this is a problem that can be fixed by the Homeowners Association. I mean,
Well, as Mr. Bacon pointed out 16 days ago when we started today, if he did say that it is actually technically a private ditch, which is behind, or section 1. So, yes, I would agree that if it being a privately held ditch, that if there was I mean, again, if we had been told about this 3 years ago, we could probably have ameliorated the problem, and we could have controlled what was removed in terms of the logs. But I did reach out to the Homeowners Association. I have not heard anything back from them formally. I asked them to, but
yeah,
No.
yeah.
so, thank you.
Oh,
Well, and also on the point of the homeowners association, they do own that parcel, but they have members who pay assessments, I'm assuming, I don't know that. But if it functions like a normal
would
homeowners
think,
association, they have assessments.
Okay.
And the homeowners association certainly could have, if they wanted to meet and convene and file a claim for damages, they could have done that. But the issue of it still being within that drainage easement that is for public use, including stormwater drainage uses, it probably wouldn't have been awarded either. But certainly hearing from the homeowners association in terms of what they might have been willing to do could have been helpful.
Yeah, I mean, if they would have come forward with a plan to clear the stream and the logs, and, I mean, that just seems that would have been good, really good. Boy, yes, come forward, please.
Mrs. Thomas again. In response to your HOA.
Sure,
Yes, in response to your HOA
just
question.
introduce yourself.
Apologize, Mrs. Thomas, Jahan
Yes.
Thomas, 151. In response to the HOA situation, I do have emailed responses from them on specific questions that we asked that I can provide to you, if you would so choose. One of the points was the The question was, did the HOA realize that it was the HOA's land and trees that would be altered? And they said we would not be, we were not asked permission. Unfortunately, we do not have details on the logistics. So it kind of coincides with this idea of us not petitioning for downstream when we're given information 3 weeks before we're going to be affected. Would the HOA even have enough time to come back and present a plan for maintenance or us paying for it, which we would gladly do? We would have also gladly issued a petition, Mr. Bacon, to talk about and to try to provide some sort of information and positivity around this to help the residents of Lanetta Lane. There are actually things that you would tell us as residents that would ease our minds, but using the term open channel restoration and the fact that there is a 75-foot easement around which the construction crew is allowed to operate is very worrisome, because that does mean that those are trees on the banks that need to be taken care of. So those were just my final points. I do not know if you want the information from our HOA. It's only in the form of an email. I did not provide it print form.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
As you said, you as individual homeowners pay assessments to your homeowners association. So you have some control over what they do? Yes, thank you.
Again, this is Mr. Sanislow. We are, at the start of every calendar year, we are issued assessments. I think it's currently $250. And it's individually based upon each parcel. And then we elect, there is a board that is elected. Aside that, we have.
But they would have bylaws, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
I mean, do you see it being a remedy that you could approach them and talk to them about this?
I think it is
clearing it.
I think that it is a remedy. I mean, I know that when we're talking about situations like this, and obviously there are people for and against this, and people are very, they have a lot at stake, upstream and and at the bottom of the stream. This is the type of case where I know and maybe it's a possibility or not, but this is the type of thing where you would have mediation, and mediation would be really important. However, one of the stakeholders, which would be my side of the people at Harvest Wind with our homeowners association, because they actually do own the land, they've been put in a box because we only had 3 weeks to deal with this. And as you know, with boards and things like that, I know that the wheels turn very slowly. And I had reached out to them about this whole process, and there was about hiring legal counsel. I am an attorney. And I had submitted to them, I was like, listen, I understand, I know lawyers are not cheap. And I know they were very reluctant to get a lawyer involved. And I think that that's where they were probably, they had a pause because they didn't know what to do, and they didn't want to pay for a lawyer. Again, in the 11th hour, we've been brought into this. But I think that in terms of getting the Harvest Wind Association, who owns the land, involved, I think that that's a significant importance that had we known about this 2 years ago, we could have worked together as a collective. But now, unfortunately, from our side of the table, Harvest Wind, we are back on our heels, and we're just kicking and clawing and to whatever we can to try to not lose what we've got.
Okay, thank you. Taking this back.
Hi, Lisa Klecharowski, 7816 Lanetta Lane, parcel 36. I feel compelled to come up and say something when my name is brought up in a PowerPoint by somebody else in a hearing.
Sure.
And there are a couple things I'd like to clarify. And there was reference that I was a lead petitioner in this process. And the point of clarification for anybody who's never filed one of these, I had never done that before, is that this isn't Lisa's petition for Lanetta Lane. This was, it was my understanding that someone on Lanetta Lane needed to file the petition on behalf of the homeowners, which is what I did. I filed the petition on behalf of the homeowners on Lanetta Lane who attended the initial meeting. So in terms of lead petitioner, this wasn't driven by me. I was just the vehicle by which to file the paperwork. And I was willing to do so on behalf of my neighbors. Secondly, it is true that I filed a variance to split my lot, which is currently around 5 acres. And as a homeowner, and as any homeowner in this room, we all have the right to do so, to pursue the outlined process for filing for a variance for whatever we might want to do on the property that we own. I followed the process as outlined by Genoa Township, and I was awarded a positive response to that. If you're going to read part of what my petition, my application stated, you may want to read the entire application and know that what was behind my request to split a lot off to potentially build a house on it was so that I could move my 85-year-old mother to be closer to me. She currently lives in Cleveland. So that was my motivation behind pursuing the variance. The reality of it is, nobody likes change, I get it. Nobody wants to pay money, I get it. You could probably throw me in that boat. But the reality is there are a lot of people that are having significant issues that are costing them money and have cost them money as a result of an insufficient drainage solution. Lanetta Lane, my home was built in 1986, was one of the first ones that was built on the street. I'm willing to guess, I'm not a historian, I did live in Columbus then, I didn't live here, but I'm pretty willing to guess there are a lot more homes than any that have been built on Lanetta Lane in the surrounding subdivisions that have contributed to the drainage issues in this watershed and subsequently impacted all of us on Lanetta Lane. I don't think that one home built in the past 9.5 years that I've lived on Lanetta Lane, there has been one home constructed, and I don't think that that home is going to tip anybody over the edge downstream from us to get a lot more water on their property. So the reality of it is, if the downstream, if our water has nowhere to go because it was designed well before Eagle Trace or Medallion or Harvest Wind or any others, if our water can't get to where it used to be able to get to, then nothing we do upstream is gonna sufficiently help what's happening upstream. So we are ultimately, on Lanetta Lane, held hostage unless the downstream work gets done and the water can actually get away from our property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Boy, is it, yeah,
Well, the gentleman behind you had his hand up first. so-
yeah, but I'm reluctant because, is this something new? I don't want things repeated. We've heard. A question, okay.
Once again, Sean Curran, 6244 Spring Run. And Commissioner Merrill, you mentioned it, and I don't know if it was lighthearted, but you talked about chainsaws and hand tools, and I think the code
Well,
even
little
states
both,
that.
right.
Right. It states that wherever possible, use hand tools. But for maybe clarification, you talked about giving us some comfort. How would a backhoe work on the bank?
Okay.
Especially if there's trees everywhere. I would, and this is my assumption, you'd have to clear every tree within the footprint of that machinery, correct? Or would it back up, go around the tree, start again, back up? if that's the case, okay, that provides clarification. I mean,
Won't you stamp it, make for the
Yeah.
record?
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring this picture up, and I don't want this to be construed as an argument for or against the project. We go to great lengths at the Soil and Water District and the county engineers to not take a position on these projects. Our job's to be a technical resource, our job's to design them and to supervise construction to make sure they get built as designed. This channel, or what you're seeing in this picture, is a very good representative picture of a channel that was built through a wooded area, showing how a contractor can move around those larger trees that you see on the right bank of this channel, the right side of the channel. So this is one that we actually did. And when I say the only thing that I can provide as comfort or as a statement to the residents is our past history. This channel is a very good picture of that past history. And how you described it in your second example, that is exactly how it's done. They excavate the channel, they move around the tree, they reach in, they excavate it from the other side.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Lyle Wiley, 7626 Lanetta Lane. I have been sworn in. I guess one thing that I would like to add that is something new, maybe could be considered, maybe could not be considered. As I said, I'm a developer in Granville. I was required to put together a pretty strategic map, and I had to physically go and mark every tree. And in Section 1, I would propose that it be mandated that every tree be mapped and marked to where these homeowners had some assurance of what was going to happen. And then, even with your contractor, if they didn't abide by that, there could be penalties for them. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you.
Renee Vaughn, looks like she wants to speak.
Oh, Renee.
Good afternoon. Renee Vaughn
Yes,
from Genoa
yes.
Township. Do I need to be sworn in?
Yes. Oh, yes. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Renee Vaughn, 6368 Mahogany Drive. I'm here to represent Genoa Township today as we're part of the ditch petition. We don't have a side for or against. As you know, we are going to be assessed $142,000+ for this petition. It will come out of our roads levy. So we are just asking that our assessment be 15 years, if that's the max for Genoa Township, because if we have to pay more than that per year, we will not be able to repave as many roads per year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I know the answer to this, the gentleman's suggestion about giving more, amending the petition or making it clear that whatever was cut would be.
What is being proposed would be in the form of a plan note, and I'll let the engineers talk about that and how
Okay.
effective they think that would be, or whether they have experience doing that on as dense of woods that we're talking about. But that would be a plan change that could impact the estimate, and I'll rely on the engineer. If there's a plan change and it would change the estimate, you would need to have the engineer, you would have to continue the hearing, have the engineer make that change, revise the estimate, new notices to everybody, reconvene the hearing. So that's the process to do it, which you can do.
Okay.
The final hearing, you're allowed to entertain any changes to the nature of the work, the scope of work, things like that. So that would be in the nature of a plan change. And I'll let the engineer's office elaborate on what that might look like.
Okay.
We certainly could undertake the process of of marking and flagging trees, locating those trees on the plan. There's more engineering, field work, and time associated with that. It adds to the cost of the project, but that certainly can be done. I've heard several things brought up during the course of testimony. One was about replacing trees over a certain caliper that we would take out. That could add very significantly to the cost of the project. But again, if that's a direction you'd want us to head, we could do that. But I was going to, Eric answered the question I was going to ask procedurally. I don't know that we can alter the plans to that today in this hearing, so that you can proceed with the decision if that's your wish. But if you would want us to provide more information about the nature of the clearing and what trees in particular would be marked to be saved, we can do that. It'll take some time.
What did you have I think for peace of mind, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
What would we talking another 5,000, we're talking another, I mean, it can't be that expensive, can it, to go down to the channel and mark those trees?
You're talking about the actual cost of adding that. Yeah, it would take a survey for us to actually locate pinpoint the location of those trees, so there's no question to the contractor which trees we're talking about. And we're not arguing about, well, that wasn't the tree you told us to protect, or that was. The only way to ensure that is to locate it specifically with survey data. But I would think several $1,000s of survey work and plan work could accomplish that.
Can you understand from the perspective of the neighbors
I do.
why that would be important?
Yeah, I totally understand why people are concerned about this. In fact, if I lived my backyard backed up to this area in question, I'd certainly not want any negative impacts to come from that. I think I do think that what the work we have proposed and that we understand and that we communicate to our contractors, we have a level of comfort that the results aren't going to be anywhere near as draconian as folks might suspect, but there's no way for them to know and understand that. So,
But they would have a certain level of reassurance just seeing the trees marked.
I understand that. Yeah, I do think somewhere between the condition it's in today and their fear of what it will look like, that the easement will be totally clear cut. There's no way for us to dip out sediment in the bottom of that basin without getting a piece of mechanical equipment in there and doing that, and there will be vegetation that's removed. By the very nature of the work and the cost of the work, the smaller vegetation, the more small vegetation that can be removed, the less cost there is for the contractor, and therefore he has the same motivation that we all do. But there's no way for us to accomplish that and to leave it looking the way it does now.
I have one other. Renee made a request. I wasn't sure I understood it. Could you respond to that?
Yes.
So I think traditionally, all of our projects have had assessments that are over 8 years, 16 semi-annual assessments. And the reason for that is because the revised code used to make that the upper limit. Several years ago, there was a revision that increased that to 15. So 15 years over 30 semi-annual installments is the max.
I thought I heard her say 50 is the reason I was.
Oh, no, 15.
No,
15.
15.
Okay.
Yes, 15.
Yeah, just the payment schedule.
But you cannot.
Extended.
You cannot spread theirs
Without-
over 15 years. It would be the entire project that would be the time in which to pay the assessments. So anybody, I know that there are some assessments that are $36 and change. I'm assuming most of those people, if they were subject to that assessment, would pay it up front and not have that assessed. But any of the ones who are larger dollar amounts, if they were not going to pay up front, as the law allows, you have to, in your action approving the project, set the number of years in which those installments are to
Okay.
be paid.
So in summary, to honor Genoa's request would have to make it all effective.
It would have to be all subject to the same time period, not owner by owner.
Okay.
And that's because you have two options. You can either pay out of county funds, or you can issue bonds. And so you are not going to issue bonds at different timeframes for one small project. And this is a small project, even though it's several $100,000. So you have to have that apply to everybody. Can't pick and choose.
Sure. Your concerns, again, about prevailing wage, are you still thinking, we don't really know about that? Except, like you say, if certain parts of the project are not fulfilled, then we would come under that threshold of prevailing wage. I understand that.
The
But
quick
if we
math,
don't-
the quick math that I could do was looking at the project as a total assessment of something like 325,000, and 142 is something like, the remainder of that would be about 56%, because I think that's about 44%. So that's the quick math. So it needs to be 75% private assessed minimum to meet that requirement. If you take away sections 3, north and south, it would meet that because you don't have that large direct assessment to Genoa Township.
But that should not be the reason we're doing it for prevailing wage. It should be done because it's not needed, or we don't think it's needed.
Correct. You have to apply
Just
the
wanna make that-
factors to
just
all
wanna make that
sections.
statement that we're not doing it for the wrong reason.
But I would be concerned
Yeah.
that if you find that all of the factors support granting the petition as to sections 3, north and south, that would be a concern.
Right.
that
It's the amount of money
prevailing
we're
wage is not
talking about
included.
that puts us in having to pay prevailing wage, and therefore we can't go ahead with an actual dollar figure.
From a strictly legal standpoint, I would only advise you that you have to make sure that the bid documents include that language. But you are at risk that your assessment is known to be too low for what the anticipated expense might be. So my recommendation would be that if you want to have a full consideration of all of the sections, that you direct county engineer to determine definitively whether any of those sections, if done, would require prevailing wage be included as a part of the contract. And then there would be a necessary revision to the estimate, and then thereby the schedule of assessments as well.
Thank you. I think we're looking, I'll let you go, Jeff, but I'm thinking we may be looking at a postponement.
Yeah, anybody else speak? I'll start by kind
Okay.
of laying out where I am. I really appreciate everyone participating in this. These are really challenging assignments for us, for you all. And one thing that really bothers me is that we did not give the Harvest Wind folks very much time to study it. And I think Harvest Wind in particular has a path to resolving this on their own, working through the HOA. As a rule, I would much rather have the private sector do this work than the public sector. I spent my career in the private sector, and I just, that's my preference. I think it can be done cheaper, it can be done more efficiently. But having said that, I truly believe that Section 1 and Section 2 both need to be done. I'm convinced that that's the case, but I would prefer that it be done more carefully thought out and work toward a private sector solution through the HOA, because I really think the HOA is the key here in Section 1. And again, I really think the ditch needs to be cleared. I'm not as concerned as you all are about the damage to the trees and everything, because again, these guys have done, how many ditches do you maintain, Brett? 600? They maintain 600 of these ditches around the county. And I have yet to receive a complaint, about shoddy work or any environmental issues. They are very concerned about it. We all live here, we all want it to be nice, so I think we share that. So I'm going to recommend that we do a continuance. I think there is the real opportunity, maybe even a likelihood, that working with Soil and Water, who are very good at this, to work out a solution with the HOA. But I want to see in 3 months or so, whenever we can do the continuance, I want to see a real long-term solution, not just clear it out one time, but maintain it. Because that's one thing that the ditch petition process does, is they maintain it in perpetuity, and they do a really good job at it. That's what I'm really going to look forward to. So I would prefer that we do a continuance, I think, until November sometime. I think we have a date in mind that if we
Let me
went back-
comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Lori, I believe that was your name, Lori? You said, you're coming up, you don't have to, come ahead. You said that give some time, you guys thought you could work up a...
Yes.
And I take you at your word on that.
Yes.
And it's not just a tactic to delay things.
Right, no, of course, we
And
want to figure this out.
because I do believe, to Commissioner Ben's point, this problem is solvable
Yes,
on the private side. But we do have an issue upstream that we're obligated to address.
of course.
And it is being created by growth of this vegetation over the years, et cetera, and it needs to get addressed.
Okay,
And so my challenge to you, because I thought you handled it very well, I thought you were very skillful in how you framed it,
Thank you.
and I trust you,
okay.
okay? So I'm going to put you on the spot if you kind of take the lead to make sure that that process takes place.
Yes, we will get a hold of our HOA.
And because ultimately, we owe it upstream to address the issue.
Of course, yes, for sure. I will take the lead on that. I also just want to say, I think if we didn't go privately and we did go this route, as long as we would have those provisions, like I said, the 3 caliper trees, we just want to make sure our bigger trees and our woods is not getting cleared out, so. Yes, I will work on that. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel the same way. I actually belong to an HOA, and I'm very familiar with how it works, and I know HOAs definitely differ. We don't have a realty company or anybody else handling it. We just have our HOA and the owners of the properties there, of the homes, actually the land, participate in the HOA, but, and we have bylaws, and it works. So I would certainly hope, too, that the HOA, I think that's extremely important, that the HOA can come up with a plan. And that said, I would like to very much thank our engineer and both Brett and Dan and all of our soil and water people. You do a great job, and this is not easy. So I'll ask the clerk to read the, oh, yes.
I would just ask if we are going to continue the hearing for clear direction from the board as far as what you are expecting from our office and from the county engineer. I completely understand the concern about prevailing wage, that's a fairly easy adjustment for us to make. But if you are also asking us to mark those trees and add them to the plan, as I've heard bannered about a little bit, but please take that,
Sure.
please give
You wanna know what,
consideration.
sure.
Well, I mean, I guess, please direct us to do so, but also in setting your date for continuance, please understand that type of work requires survey that we physically cannot do at this point. We need winter. I need leaves off the trees to be able to do that work. And so in setting that time frame, I would look out 9 to 12 months to provide us an adequate amount of time to do that.
And that goes to another point in terms of time. You need to provide clear direction as to the plan change that you're ordering so that the engineer knows exactly what to prepare. But you do not have authority to direct a private solution to Section 1. That is entirely up to the private owners, and there is a procedure for that under the statute. It's 6131.63. I can't give anybody in the room legal advice but I at least gave you the statute that you can look at and talk to an attorney or somebody else. That has its own timelines and processes built into it. Because recall, as a part of the presentation, you were informed on your decision points that Section 2 can't happen without Section 1. And so if there's to be a private solution for Section 1, the process under 6131.63 would need to take place before you would take action under the petition, because that section is integral to Section 2, Section 3. So you can't really make those decisions on Section 2 and Section 3 until you know what happens with Section 1, unless you dismiss the entire petition.
Well, I wasn't directing a private solution. I was just encouraging the homeowners to work with their HOA to see if they could come up with a private solution that would work.
No, let me be clear. I just didn't want us to come back at the next hearing and when something either is or isn't done, not actually be able to proceed as intended. So it's just a point of clarification that if there's going to be a private solution that's going to take the place of a part of this petitioned project, there is a procedure that needs to be followed to do that. The only way that you could proceed to a final decision on this project without that being done would be if you were to dismiss the entire petition, because you need that Section 1 piece before you move on.
Yeah.
So I think you understand that you can't order them to do anything. That's a private solution. If they can't do it, you have to proceed with your decision point.
I think to make sure I'll summarize it, if there's no successful movement on the side of the private, we would be prepared theoretically to move forward as we would typically on these. Is that
I think
consistent with your
I just wanted to be
thought
clear
process?
that the county engineer, when they're doing what they're required to do under the statute based on this change in plan and looking at the prevailing wage issue, they're not doing anything in terms of factoring in a private solution to Section 1. I didn't want anybody to walk away from the room thinking that was taking place.
That was not the understanding.
Correct. Now, we need also to instruct, Brett?
I hesitate to make this statement. I will anyway. I will also say that any privately constructed solution needs to meet the lines and grades that we have spec'd out in order for the proposed solution for Section 3 and Section 2 to work. So, we are happy to provide our plan to the HOA if they feel like they would like to go in and construct that portion. But we would still have certain elevation points that we would need to then go in and inspect, determine whether it has met our plan, and then if that is the case, then we would propose to take that constructed area onto drainage maintenance in its post-constructed state. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Okay. And we discussed having Engineer Bowserman, who does the survey?
But we'll work with Soil and Water to have that done. So, as I understand it, there's 2 action points for us in the meantime, for whenever, between now and when you reconvene. One is to investigate the prevailing wage issue further and come to better clarification of that. And if we do need to adjust the estimate accordingly, we would also recalculate the assessments on properties based on that, and those will be shared with property owners. Secondly, we want us to investigate more definition on what vegetation will be removed and what will be protected under the plan. So those are the 2 action points that I've written down for us.
That is my understanding.
Yeah, I heard 9 months. That seems like a long time, but is that a reasonable amount of time? Do you think you need that much?
Here's the issue that Brett's alluding to. When we do survey work in the woods, it's difficult under full vegetation, and so when the leaves are off is the time for us to do that, and so that's why Brett's identified. Really, we probably wouldn't get started on this work for another 2 to 3 months.
Mid-November.
I was going to say even January. By the time there's enough foliage off, we'd be able to get in and do that. And then just giving consideration to the plan modifications that would be necessary and our other projects that we are also still working on.
Okay, so you're saying January?
No, January is when he would be in the
I'm saying
field.
we would not be able to begin. We use survey equipment that is very good when it's
Okay.
not underneath of a tree. And so, there's wooded areas that we are just simply not able to survey at this time of the year. We would be, I'll say, hindered by that until we would get into early winter, until we would actually be able to go out and physically do the survey work that would be necessary to produce the plan modifications that I'm thinking you're going to request us to do here.
Okay,
So
so,
I do have one more. Eric, when we reconvene, whenever that is, can we pick up where we are? We don't have to go back through the pro and con testimony, and we just limit it to this issue, or what does that mean?
Well, I mean, there's going to be new notices that go out, and there's going to be potentially a new schedule of assessments. So to the extent that the board needs to hear additional testimony on maybe cost benefit or impacts of the project due to any kind of a plan change, you'll just have to gauge what testimony is repetitive versus is necessary due to the change in information. And that's within your discretion as to what is repetitive testimony and what is necessary based on the changed information. And the board has entire discretion on what to hear and consider. So I'm assuming that there would be some supplementary testimony that would be necessary, at least from some owners.
okay. And we need to come up with a date now, right?
May 1st of 2023.
We need that long? June 1st? That's 10 months.
I told you I
That's
get my
pretty-
stabs. At this point, yes, I would be comfortable with that. I do know that we do have a procedure by which, should we need more time, we can request that from the board. I believe that's not an issue, although Eric, please correct me if that's.
Well, we're going to set a hearing to a date certain, so it will be reconvened that date. If they
Yes.
need to continue it again, they can do that at
That's right.
at that
Like we
new
did
hearing
with-
date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Okay.
wouldn't anticipate that being a problem today.
May 1st, is that what you?
Yes.
Can I ask the question?
Our clerk,
It's about the dates.
okay.
Just real quickly, I think there's some people from Lanetta who are looking at 9 months out and going through a whole fall, winter, spring season and staring down the barrel of a lot more flooding on Lanetta the further we push this out. So I just wanted to make sure that was taken into consideration as well. If we push it 9 or 12 months out, that's another year of storms and snow and drainage that's going to compact and compound the issue we have now. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. My name is Lyle Wiley, and I just would like the board to also remember that it has to go through phase 2 before it gets to phase 1. So that is that's where our block is.
Thank you.
Section 2.
Let's give our clerk some guidance.
Res-
I mean, I'm okay with May 1. We could move it up depending upon Brett. Nothing to.
If we have to give so many days' notice before the hearing, if they're not even in the field until January, I don't know that they can move that quickly. May 1st. Resolution number 22-723, in the matter of continuing the public hearing to address the Lanetta Lane Watershed Drainage Improvement Petition Project to Monday, May 1st, 2023 at 10 a.m.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, vote.
Vote on motion 22-723. Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Merrill?
Aye.
Mrs. Lewis?
Aye. Any other motions?
No.
All right, we are adjourned.